Hey guys, welcome back. So I moved all those bricks just to have to grab all of the bricks and cover everything. So last week I told you guys how they did not know what our weather was going to do. We were supposed to have lows between like 27 and what was it, 32. Well, we ended up getting colder than they were even thinking. We had a low last night of 26 and our feel like this morning was 18. Last night I came out and threw a double layer of frost fabric on just because we were supposed to have those feel likes that were really cold. But don't worry, even though our feel like this morning was 18, tomorrow our high is 75. The crazy weather of Kansas, let me tell you. The onions, the garlic, the strawberries, all of that can handle anything pretty low. So all of that's fine. I was a little worried about the onions just with the feel like temperature of 18, but they did okay. We really didn't get cold for too long. We ended up not really reaching those temps until about like, I think 7 o'clock this morning. And then at that point, we started to warm up. But I am gonna go ahead and leave the bricks here because looks like at the end of the week, we have a chance of another low of 28. So they say. Still feels really cold out here compared to what it has been. So I'm not going to be spending too much time out here today. Let me tell you how big of a pain in the butt it is to put frost fabric down when it's windy. Frost fabric for the win. Today being a little bit cooler of a day, I am gonna go ahead and start my tomatoes. But first I wanna share with you guys that I'm pretty positive I'm having my first fail of 2024. So if you're new here or haven't seen the last few videos, this is the first year I'm doing sweet potatoes and well, it's not my first year growing sweet potatoes. I have grown sweet potatoes one other year, but I was given the slips. This is the first year though I'm attempting to grow my own slips and I'm pretty sure I'm already failing at it. So I have two potatoes that look just fine and they are starting to root out and they feel fine. But my one that's the furthest along is completely rotting out. And I'm pretty positive that is not what you want to see when it comes to starting sweet potato slips. I'm currently leaving it because I really this is the one that's furthest along and I'm hoping that maybe I can get another week and maybe be able to cut it and root it that way in some water. But I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to completely toss this, unfortunately. The other two are doing just fine at the moment, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that is not what you want to see when it comes to sweet potatoes. But everything else is doing really well in here. So I am going to be planting out my lettuce tomorrow. It's looking really good. And then let's see here. I have all of my snapdragons and then my lavender. And then this is what we started last week, everything but the parsley is starting to poke up. So I have my lemon basil, my regular basil, and then I think my first loofah is starting to pop up. So that's cool to see. And then we have my dahlias, oregano, and then hibiscus. And then we have all of the peppers, which I just kind of lifted this up a little bit, but all the peppers are looking really good. And then I also have some oregano back here as well. So today and then I believe like end of next week are my last two rounds of really seed starting for the spring and summer season. So today I am gonna go ahead and get another round of lettuce sown as well because my lettuce is so much more advanced than it was in previous years. And I think that really just comes down to the timing and feeding the plants this year. So I am gonna get a second round going because I will be able to probably harvest those lettuces in like 2 to 3 weeks and then be able to plant out another round, which I'll still be cool enough to do so. And then I'm also gonna start some peppermint today. So last week when I was doing everything in the garden, I realized that my peppermint plant wasn't coming back, which is honestly kind of shocking. I've had this plant, I I think for the last 2 or 3 years now, and sometimes my perennials just won't come back depending on how cold we get, but I think that was simply because it got really dry in the pot and just died. So I am going to start more peppermint, and then the other thing I'm going to start outside of tomatoes today is some more hyssop. So I've always had hyssop throughout my garden. This has been in my garden every single year, but 2 years ago, we got down to -40 in feel likes, and it pretty much wiped out majority of my hyssop. And then I only had like 2 or 3 plants last year, and then I ripped them out at the end of the year. I really love hyssop. This is amazing for bees. It does smell a little bit like licorice, but it's really pretty, and I've always really enjoyed it. We'll see if these seeds germinate well or not, because the seed packet is from 2018. So it's probably one of the oldest seed packets I have in here, which it should do well. I mean, they're about 6 years old, so they should do well though. I've never had an issue when it comes to growing hyssop. It's in the mint family as well, so it does spread like crazy. But yeah, we're gonna do those today, and then I'm going to do my tomatoes. So for tomatoes this year, I am growing majority varieties I have always grown. There's only one new variety I haven't grown, which is this Inca Jewels from Renee's garden. This one is supposed to be really, really good for containers. It's supposed to be a high producing, like space saving plant. So I'm really excited to try this. I am growing the Supremo again. So last year my Supremos did really well. They had some beautiful Roma tomatoes on them. So I'm going to give them another go. They did get knocked out a little early with blight, but I got so many tomatoes off of each plant that I really wanted to give these ones a second go. I'm also doing just some classic Romas again. You'll notice I'm doing majority paste varieties. Well, I actually grow all paste minus a cherry tomato, because I just like paste tomatoes better. I'm not a big fan of watery tomatoes with your beefsteak tomatoes. And since I do majority salsa making and also sauce making, like I just love to make tomato products when it comes to canning, and paste varieties are what you really want for that, so they're less watery. And this year I really want to do a bunch more diced tomatoes. I went through all of those so fast when it came to like making chilies and stuff like that. So my game plan for tomatoes this year is diced tomatoes, salsa, and sauce. So I'm really excited about these 3. And then I am going to go ahead and plant out 2 San Morzanos as well for my 1 trellis space. And then I'm also doing pink bumblebee again. So the pink bumblebee is the only tomato I've been growing outside of any paste varieties. This is a really, really pretty cherry. It has a really deep red color, but it has this beautiful striping. And I love this for a pasta recipe. I make this summer pasta recipe, and then this is also just so good on pizzas as well. So I will be starting all of those as well. Yesterday I did go ahead and kind of prep for today. I got all of my nursery pots washed up and ready to go. So one thing that is important when it comes to like seed starting equipment is to make sure you're washing it every season, because for instance, say you had like something get diseased or didn't do so hot, or maybe you left soil in it and it has like a mildew and stuff in it. You want to wash all that away. That way you're not reintroducing that every single year. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get a bunch of pots filled. So I do like to use these 3-inch pots when it comes to tomatoes. So I've said this multiple times this year already, tomatoes grow really fast. And for me, this is a really good size. I believe these are 3¼ inch pots. I always love a 3-inch nursery pot. This is going to be one of the last few things I really do in nursery pots this year. This year I've only done my pepper plants in 3-inch pots, and that's been it so far. So in previous years I did a lot in nursery pots, but over the years I've gravitated a lot more toward soil blocking, just because it's just that much more it's just way less cleanup, and it's way easier to plant things out. But yeah, tomatoes, I don't even mess with anything smaller than this, because once they start to take off, they really take off. So this is another thing. Last week I told you guys I was going to start tomatoes, but I decided to go ahead and wait one more week. I'm currently sitting exactly at 4 weeks from our last average frost. And for me, I plant out about a week and a half, 2 weeks later. So these won't be planted out for another 5.5, 6 weeks roughly. I like to plant out my tomatoes and peppers once we are averaging in the 50s at nighttime. I really don't want to see anything dip a lot lower than that, especially for peppers. And that's mostly because they really don't like the cold. And I've just noticed that if I wait a little bit longer, tends to be better, because sometimes we have a fluke cold. And last year I was going back through my April garden tour because I was curious to see where my plant starts were and all of that, and we ended up having a little cold spell at the end of April last year. So Kansas is so weird, guys. Like tomorrow it's going to be 75 and today our high is like I think 49. So it's really crazy to kind of gauge everything here, but I feel like I've gotten a lot better throughout the years. As always, I'm just going to get out my bin. I'm going to mix up some organic potting mix with some worm castings, pre-moisten it, and just fill up a bunch of pots. I have plans to plant out right around 40. Sprinkle in some worm castings. And this bag of soil does not look as dry as some of my others, so I'm not going to start off with as much water. So as always, I'm using a 10-20 tray lined with a mesh tray. I also like to use the mesh trays even when I'm using nursery pots, because this allows me to bottom water and then I can just allow the water to sit. The plants can soak up. I love the mesh trays for that reason, because I personally love to bottom water my plants, and I find them just to be complete game changer when it comes to watering seedlings. Otherwise, watering seedlings can just be really tedious, because I found that throughout the years that I didn't have the mesh trays, I would have to be watering quite often, and then I also wouldn't be deep watering as well as I could have. So when you are doing bottom watering, the plants can just soak up the water they need and they leave the rest behind, and that allows me to have to water a lot less. I actually just did this with my pepper plants the other day, and I had a whole tray of peppers that I could wait on, so I allowed those ones to not be watered, and I went ahead and watered all the other ones, and they soak up all of the water. And typically, like at this time, I really only have to water my pepper plants like maybe once a week. Once they get a bit bigger, that will definitely change, but for the most part, it's really hands off. So all I'm doing here is I'm using my 3-inch pots, and I am compacting the soil down into these pots. This definitely takes a little bit more time than just making a handful of soil blocks, but I won't have to touch these tomato plants again. There is a chance I might have to pot some of my flowers, like my dahlias are already doing really, really well, and those won't be planted out for another 6 weeks either. I am going to be planting out in my garden. I think it's like 39 or 40 plants. I'll have to double check my garden plans, but as far as my indeterminates go, so my indeterminate tomatoes are my San Marzanos and my pink bumblebee. An indeterminate plant means it grows to an indeterminate height. These things will completely go up my entire arch of my trellis. They grow really, really tall. All of my other varieties are determinate. So determinate plants grow to be roughly like 4 to 5 feet in height, and they pretty much don't grow much taller. A lot of people will say like a determinate plant will put on all its fruit all at once and then ripen all at once. That's never been my experience. I did have more of that experience when it came to my Supremo variety last year, but for the most part, I still had the plants putting on more flowers and more fruit, you might just not get as many. You do get more of an influx when it comes to a determinate, like putting on a bunch of fruit and ripening all at the same time. But for me, I freeze my tomatoes until I'm ready to make sauce. I will do more processing throughout the summer this year because my game plan is to do more diced tomatoes as well, and also more salsa. And I really just love determinate plant. One thing I like to do is once a tomato starts to blush, I will take it off of the tomato plant and let it finish ripening inside, just because that's completely fine to do. It also helps deter any type of squirrel or bird from going after your tomatoes. So if you have birds and squirrels going after your tomato plants, it can be because they're thirsty. And one thing I realized last year was I put out a bird bath, and when I did more research about the bird bath, I found that when you have a bird bath, they tend to leave your tomato plants alone. And I didn't have a single tomato taken by a squirrel, which was shocking because every single year prior to that, I would at least have a handful of tomatoes, either like have a chunk taken out of them, eaten by something, or yeah, a bird would peck at it. And I read that's because they're thirsty, which makes sense, especially because it would only happen during like peak summer when we were hitting like 100 degrees and water was a little bit more scarce because we were going through droughts and stuff. So I have really, really loved having a bird bath in my backyard garden. I love seeing all the different birds. Like I have so many blue jays and cardinals right now, and there are still squirrels that come and they drink out of it, and also bees. So another thing you may not realize is bees, they need to drink water, and if you have a water source, they tend to stick around your garden a lot more, helping pollinate your plants as well. So keep that in mind. I got my bird bath through an auction last week. I told you guys how I love estate auctions because you can find some amazing deals when it comes to just everything gardening related. And I think I got my bird bath for like 20 bucks. There is some cracking in it, so it doesn't hold water as well as it possibly could. I am gonna try to seal that in some type of way this year, but it still works fine. I just fill it up every morning. Okay, so it's the next day. It's a beautiful 75-degree day. It is gorgeous. I have a soil test here, so I don't have time to send my soil off to the extension office like I did last year. I really like to do that, but that's really good to do like in fall, winter time when you have time to get it back. It takes like 6 weeks or so to get it back. So I just got a standard soil test that I can test the pH, the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in all of the new soil. I really wanted to at least get somewhat of an idea, even if it's not like the 100% accurate like it is when I send it off to the extension office, just so I can see exactly where this soil is hanging out that I got last week and I put into all the grow bags. And then there's a few areas of my garden I'm also going to test too, because I figured why not? It's better to be safe than sorry and to get a better idea on all the soil testing. I'm also curious about the pH because last year my pH was high and I had to lower it pretty much everywhere. So I really think soil tests are just the way to go if you are just not sure. It's a good indicator on what your soil could be lacking, and I'm sure the soil I bought is probably lacking something. So yeah, I'm gonna go around and get a handful of different soil samples, and then I have distilled water, which is really important when you are doing any type of soil testing because the water pH can change your results, and if you have distilled water, it's at that neutral. So yeah, I'm gonna go around and grab some soil and start testing everything. Last year I sent off like 7 separate samples, and they all came back very similar since I plant out so many different things in my garden beds. And then I like do so much succession sowing that they were all kind of lacking very similar things. So I'll be curious to see if that's how it is today. One thing I'd like to note when it comes to getting your soil sample is you want to kind of get close to about 6 inches deep when collecting your little soil sample. I'm already seeing cabbage moths flying around, which I feel like is pretty early. I'm gonna start with the new soil because that's what I'm most curious about. So I'm just gonna line up all of these here. You can hear a cat meowing. That is Sweeney. I have distilled water here. I'm just going to pour into this little jar to make my life a bit easier. So first I'm going to take my soil. It's been a really long time since I've done one of these like at-home test kits. I don't know if you guys can see how many bruises I have, but I have a bunch of bruises. Fill this to the line. The last time I checked the pH of the soil, I think was in fall, and it was still looking pretty good. Shake. And I let it sit. Sending it off to the extension office literally takes so much guesswork out, but I think this will be just fine. So this is the new soil, and they say to kind of put it in some sunlight. To me, that's looking a little high. All right, so I got that all written down and I got it all cleaned out. So now I'm gonna move on to the front soil here. And that is what I like to see. So this is my front garden beds, and we are neutral. So it looks like everything I did last year really worked. So knowing the pH is important because if your pH is high or low, your plants can't absorb the nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium correctly. So that's one reason why it is important to check your pH as well. All of the other soil sitting and waiting. All right, so here are all the lettuces. I can't believe they're already heading up, to be completely honest, but here's some of the flashy trout I also planted. This is a Paris Island romaine, and this is the flashy trout. Look how cool those leaves are on that. So one of the places I'm going to be planting the lettuce is in the interior of this trellis space here where the onions and then the garlic are. So I'm just going to get this mulch back here. Probably just be easier to kind of grab it. Man, I honestly think this is the best lettuce starts I have ever grown. They are so pretty. And again, the fish and seaweed fertilizer is what I've been using to feed all of this stuff, and I've just been so impressed by it. I'm gonna go closer to 8. I think that's what I've done in the past. I'm so excited to have all the lettuce. I've been really craving salads lately. And a head of lettuce at the store, organic, has gotten so expensive. I think they're $3.50 a head. I can buy a whole pack of hundreds of seeds for, I think, $3. So I always have a really hard time, like, really wanting to buy it at the store. One thing I really wanted, I tried last year to be better about this, and I did okay, but I really want to try to do even better this year, like during the summer months, to grow more lettuce in my basement. Insane. It's just crazy. What are we doing? Hi. Hi. Oh, hi. How are the girls? Did you just lay an egg? It looks like you did. You're super out of breath. So for this one, I put the solution, the little water solution that we put, and I put it in the thing here, all the way to the line. And this is our new soil. I'm gonna start here. And then I just add the little pellet, the packet, gonna shake this up and let it sit, and then I'm gonna keep going through with my phosphorus and also my potassium. Great, so this morning I was going over all of the notes from doing soil testing last night, and when I was going through footage, I wanted just to kind of compile everything together because it was just like, here's this, here's this, here's this, and you really couldn't like tell anything. So are these 100% accurate? Probably not, but they are at least giving me a visual of what things are currently looking like for the garden. And honestly, I'm actually shocked about the new soil. I figured the new soil would be a little bit not as good as it really truly is. I got a 50-50 mix of soil and compost, but there are a few different areas that I figured were a little bit depleted or maybe like a little bit deficient. So it's really good to see. Again, if you send off your soil samples to your extension office, you're gonna get a lot more accuracy, but I didn't have the time to do that. So I just figured I would put everything together here. So as far as like the pH goes, the new soil was looking kind of high, and it's looking like my soil for the most part in the garden that's been established is looking pretty neutral. I think the trellis area might be slightly high. And as far as like lowering my pH goes, you can use like a soil acidifier. That's what I've done in the past. That's what I use for my blueberries, because I also wrote a note here, because blueberries like an acidity of 4 to 6. They like it very acidic. And things like tomatoes like it between like a 5.5 and a 7.5. So really most of my soil should be good to go as far as like being pretty neutral goes. But yeah, it's really interesting to kind of see the differences there. For the most part, most things in a veggie garden are gonna like it between about 6 and 7. Some like it a little bit more around like a 5.5 or so, a little bit more acidic, but for the most part you're looking at pretty neutral for growing most things. But the few areas that I will probably like slightly lower it, I'll use a soil acidifier and all of that. But I was really excited to see that majority of my garden space was pretty neutral, because last year it was very hot. My pH was pretty high, so it was more alkaline than neutral, and I did a lot of trying to amend it last year to get that pH down. So as we go into the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium, let me pull up the new soil here. The new soil was looking pretty good, to be honest. I would say that the nitrogen levels are probably more on the adequate deficient, which honestly does not surprise me. For the most part, your nitrogen is going to be the nutrient that is typically the lowest. That has been in my experience over the last handful of years. That's why you always see me throw in worm castings on top of other things. As far as phosphorus goes, I would say I was pretty adequate. Might be slightly deficient, but I'm gonna go more on the scale of adequate. And then potassium for the new soil was on the adequate side as well, which is also really good to see. So for the most part, my new soil, the pH is a little bit high, so I'll probably lower that. But as far as just having pretty solid soil, I would say that all of that is looking pretty good. So as far as my front garden beds go, I would say my nitrogen levels are pretty adequate. My phosphorus is pretty adequate, if not more at a surplus. And my potassium also looked pretty adequate there. So I honestly probably won't do too much to my front garden beds either. Moving on to the back garden bed. So this is where I start to see a little bit more deficiencies in my soil. So I would say my nitrogen levels for the back are pretty deficient, and also my phosphorus as well. So for both those things, considering my potassium on these levels are sufficient or surplus, one way I could up my phosphorus is by using bone meal, and another way I could up my nitrogen is by using blood meal, which I have both of those on hand. I love having blood meal and bone meal on hand because, again, your bone meal is high in nitrogen and pretty much nothing else, and then your bone meal is high in phosphorus and nothing else. So that's good to see. Another thing I also was reading up on this morning is to use fish emulsion, or like the fish and seaweed fertilizer I've been using, because It's high in nitrogen and phosphorus, but also low in potassium. And like I said, this year has been game changer for some of my plants, especially like my garlic, all of my starts. I've been using that fish and seaweed fertilizer and I've been just loving it. So I'm really glad to see that that's another option for me as well. So moving on to the onion area. My onion area, I would say my nitrogen levels are pretty adequate deficient. I'd say they're pretty okay, but I'll probably go ahead and add more nitrogen. Anything that's more on the adequate deficient side, I'll probably bump it up to be more sufficient. Plants go through nitrogen like crazy. And when I was getting my soil test back from last year, it always says like typically you are lower in nitrogen almost always because that's what your plants feed through first. As far as phosphorus goes for the onion areas, I would say I'm pretty adequate, maybe more on the adequate deficient side, which is good to know. And then my potassium is on the sufficient surplus. So I will probably continue to feed my onion area with my fish and seaweed fertilizer as well. And then the trellis area was the one I was like, oh boy, my nitrogen levels are definitely depleted, which does not surprise me. Everything that goes in the trellis area is very heavy feeding. The loofahs, the squash, I did watermelons over there last year, cantaloupe over there last year. So it honestly doesn't surprise me. Those vines go crazy. So I was expecting to at least have something in there that was completely depleted. And I would say the trellis area was probably the lowest as far as nitrogen goes. As far as phosphorus goes, I would say we're on the deficient adequate side. I wouldn't say we're like super deficient, but I also wouldn't say we're adequate over there either. And then again, my potassium is on the adequate sufficient side. So potassium in plants, I was reading up a little bit more on this because last year I was also really high on potassium and I couldn't really remember, but potassium will affect the way plants absorb more micronutrients like calcium, magnesium, iron, zinc. As far as like getting the surplus out, you can loosen up your soil with a fork, kind of like I do all the time. I always loosen up my soil a little bit with a garden fork or a broad fork, and then you can just use water to help kind of flush some of that out, let your soil dry out, and do that a few times. But for the most part, it's going to affect, a high potassium is going to affect mostly, in my experience, tomatoes because it affects the way it can absorb calcium. And one thing you may realize with tomatoes is a lot of the times your blossom end rot is because of a calcium deficiency. So that's really good to know in those areas. And where I was planning on putting my tomatoes, I am in like a sufficient surplus. So nothing is planted there at the moment. So I might just try to go ahead and loosen up that soil and give it some good waters over the next like handful of weeks. But overall, I was actually pretty happy to see that the new soil was all around pretty good, minus a slightly high pH. I will say the trellis area looked a little slightly high as well, but for the most part, I think my pH levels are probably pretty good for the garden. I might add in a little bit of that soil acidifier. But yeah, overall, I am actually pretty happy. I really just wanted to see exactly where that new soil was sitting, considering I did send off my soil to extension offices last year. And this just gives me a little bit better idea of how the garden is currently looking soil-wise. I often get questions on how to amend soil, and really it just depends on what your soil is looking like. So I just wanted to kind of show you guys what I was doing with all of that and kind of give you guys my perspective on what I've done in the past and how things are currently looking with the soil. All right, so my game plan for the day is to reconfigure this fence to where it can go over in that corner and the girls can mess with the weeds and eat the greens and all of that. Hopefully I'm not gonna waste my time because I still need to try to clip their wings. There's only one chicken with clipped wings at the moment, and that's essential to make sure that they don't jump the fence and get into the garden. But I'm going to do the fence first and hopefully we can clip their wings and they can have a little bit of an adventure today. The one thing I don't like about my coop is the underneath area because it's really hard for me to get underneath there, and that's where the chickens always like to run. when they don't want to be around me. Ooh, look at this nice open space. Holy crap. The only thing is you have to come to me first and let me clip your wings. You gotta let me clip your wings though. Come here, honey. Good girl. All right, let's clip your wings. All right, chicken number 1. So I'm just gonna clip their flight feathers right here. Good job. Nope, nope. All right, well, almost. I need to go a little bit faster next time. I got clawed decently good. I'm gonna have to go clean that in a second. My Isas were so docile compared to these Rhode Island Reds and Wyandottes. And then I was looking up the egg count after the last few days, and I didn't realize how much less they lay compared to the Isas. The Isas are hybrid, meant for laying, and they lay almost an egg a day. They can lay up to 350 in a year. And my Rhode Islands and Wyandottes, I think they average around 280, which is significantly less. All right, well, you're missing out. You've got to let me clip your wings, though. There you go. Jump down. Look, see how easy that was? Look, did she get hurt? No, she's having a fun time. My problem is I held my Isas so much more when they were babies, and I did not hold these girls as much. Okay, well, you know, I'd prefer not to do this all day, even though I could. There's worms out here you girls can get. Like, I don't think you realize the opportunity I'm giving you, because I will gladly just leave you locked up. It makes my life a lot easier. Yep, I thought you were the one. There you go. You're really going, okay, you're really going back inside. Here, you can literally go out. You already have your wing clipped. Yeah. Right, yours are clipped. You get out there. There you go. Go have fun. Well, after 2 hours of playing tag-your-it, we got all of the chicken's wings clipped and a pretty hearty battle scar while we're at it. After about an hour and a half, I was like, you know what? I have 4 out of the 6 girls' wings clipped, so I just let them all out. And once they came out of the coop, what I ended up doing was shutting the coop door, and then I chased them around. Pretty much playing duck, duck, goose until I got the other 2's wings clipped. This morning I already collected one because I needed it for breakfast. It looks like we got 4 here today. One thing I need to do is, their one nest box broke, like the bottom of it broke. So I need to unscrew it and see if there's a way I can fix it. The whole part where the eggs roll down into it was the thing that broke, which that's what they jump up on and everything. So I don't know if there's a good way to be able to fix that or not. I'm gonna try to get this nest box off. Oh my gosh, these little flaps are annoying. Aha. Got it. All right, so this is the part that completely broke off. And I really don't know if, I might be able to, I don't know if that's something I can really fix or not. Let's see. If I super glue it, I really don't know if it will fully stay together or not, but these plastic parts are what fell off. I have had these for 2 years, but I figured they would last a lot longer than that. I'm gonna try to glue them. Okay. Super weld. Let's see if you will work, because I would really like to not buy another nest box right now. Okay, let's see. What's weird is this was the box that not many chickens have used over the last 2 years either. Like, they always prefer the one that's still fully intact in there. All right, well, that one continues to dry. Let's get the other side going. Okay, we're gonna let that fully dry. I'm gonna like reinforce the inside here. I came back over to check on the girls, and these two over here are completely dust bathing and having so much fun. Look how crazy that root is. Come here, darling. You are silly. You are silly. Looks like our blueberry plant is starting to bloom. You love grass. Yes, you do. No, you can't have the garlic. I'm sorry. You can't have garlic, but you can eat the grass. No, you can't have the garlic. No, you can't eat that. If I can do that, I think a chicken could jump on it. So I'm at least put it back together and see if it will last a little bit for me. You got a good spot. This is going to be probably the most difficult part of this whole process, is trying to rehang this, because I was not the one to hang it in the first place. But I have the holes, so I think I'm... Ha 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 ha. Put a new nest pad in here. Bam, bam. I'm gonna take that as a win for now. I have gotten a few questions about this fence. It's the hen pen from Premier One Supplies. There's no shock to it, so keep that in mind. But I typically won't let the girls out here doing this unless I'm around. I also have a bunch of trees that kind of help any type of like hawks or situations like that. So yeah, either way, I hope you guys enjoyed spending some time with me and the girls. I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye.